Welcome to a new deep dive. This is where we take your source materials, articles, notes, research, find the core insights, and give you that shortcut to being really well informed. So today we're digging into a really fascinating story. It's from the Old Testament of the book of Numbers, chapter 13. Picture this. A whole group of people, they've been through a lot, finally arrive right at the edge of this land they believe is promised to them, Canaan. And they decide to send in a scouting party, 12 leaders. Top guys, one from each tribe.
Yeah, and we're looking at this account through a reflection from a pastor. What's just striking is how these 12 individuals, they see the exact same reality on the ground, but they come back with this completely divided report, 10 versus 2. So this deep dive, we're going to unpack how that massive disagreement happened, and maybe more importantly, the huge consequences that followed.
Right, that split is key, isn't it? It feels like this story really gets to a fundamental question. How do the facts in front of us mix with our own perception? How do things like faith or fear or just our general outlook, how does that shape the choices we make and maybe even where we end up?
Exactly. The setup is pretty clear. The Israelites, they've left Egypt. The promise, according to the text, is that God will lead them to this land, the famous land flowing with milk and honey, Canaan. So Moses gets instructions, picks these 12 leaders, and these aren't just random people, they're tribal chiefs. It's a serious reconnaissance mission.
Okay, so this elite team heads in. They spend 40 days inside Canaan. What did they all agree on? What was the undisputed intel they brought back?
Well, first off, they all confirmed the land itself was incredible. Just as promised, from their viewpoint, they actually brought back physical evidence, these massive clusters of grapes, so big the text says it took 2 men to carry them on a pole. So yeah, everyone agreed. The land definitely flows with milk and honey. That part was undeniable good news.
Wow, okay, so tangible proof. That must have been a huge moment for people who had been wandering for so long.
Absolutely huge. Direct confirmation. And this is the crucial turn. The second half of their report introduced some serious obstacles. They all also reported seeing really strong inhabitants, cities with high fortified walls. Scary stuff. And they even saw the Anakites. These figures describe almost like legendary giants in the text, people known for their size and strength.
So it's complex then. Amazing land, but formidable challenges. If they all saw the same things, the good and the bad, how did they end up with such wildly different conclusions? What drove that split?
That really is the heart of it. 10 of them, the overwhelming majority, they basically fixated on the problems. The giants, the walls, the danger. They delivered what the Bible terms an evil report. Now that sounds harsh, but in this context it means a report designed to crush morale, a negative spin.
An evil report? That does sound serious. Why evil, though? Couldn't it just be, a realistic, maybe pessimistic risk assessment? Seeing giants would scare anyone?
Right. That's a really important point. And from a purely human standpoint, yes, fear seems natural. But from the theological perspective presented in the source, it goes beyond just risk assessment. It's seen as evil because it was interpreted as a rejection of God's promises. It was like saying, God brought us this far, promised us this land, but look at these giants. He can't possibly handle this. It was a vote of no confidence, essentially. They painted the land itself as terrifying, a land that devours its inhabitants, they said. And that famous line, compared to the Anakites, they felt like grasshoppers, just utterly insignificant and powerless.
Wow, grasshoppers. That image really sticks with you. It captures that feeling of complete overwhelm. Still, that initial fear response, it does feel relatable. Why is that perspective framed as so fundamentally wrong in this narrative?
Well, because it seems to have paralyzed them. It wasn't just caution, it was despair. Their final verdict was absolute. We can't do it. We can't possibly win. We shouldn't even try to enter. Total shutdown. But then you have the other two, Caleb and Joshua. And their perspective is just night and day. Caleb jumps in right away, tries to quiet the panic, and says, bold as anything, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it.
Well able to overcome it. What a contrast from we're grasshoppers to we can definitely do this.
Exactly. And it's not like they didn't see the giants or the big walls. They saw the same things, but their focus was different. They saw God's promise, his presence in the situation, the opportunity. Later on, they even doubled down, saying that if God is with them, these powerful enemies, these giants, they'll be our food.
Our food? That's about as far from grasshoppers as you can get. It's a completely different reality they're describing.
Worlds apart. But the numbers were stark. 10 spreading fear, only 2 expressing faith. So who did the people listen to?
Yeah, that's the question. What happened next? What was the immediate fallout from these 2 reports hitting the camp?
Predictably, maybe. The crowd went with the majority. They believed the 10 fearmongers. And chaos just erupted. The text says people wept all night. They started complaining bitterly against Moses and Aaron. They were saying things like, "Why did God bring us out here just to die by the sword? Wouldn't it be better to go back to Egypt?" Some even started talking about choosing a new leader to take them back.
Back to Egypt. Seriously, after everything they went through to leave, that just shows you how powerful fear can be, right? It can make you completely forget why you started the journey in the first place.
It's a potent force, and the consequences described in the story, they were devastating. According to the narrative, God's judgment was severe. He essentially declared that that entire generation of adults specifically, the men aged 20 and over, the ones fit for battle who had complained and doubted none of them except Caleb and Joshua, would enter the promised land. Instead, they were condemned to wander in the wilderness for 40 years.
40 years? That seems incredibly harsh. Why so long?
The text draws a direct line. 1 year for each of the 40 days the scouts were in Canaan. They had to wander until that whole generation passed away in the desert. And those 10 scouts who brought the evil report, the story says they died very quickly, struck by a plague.
Wow. A really sobering outcome for the majority. But amidst all that judgment, what about the two? Caleb and Joshua. What was it about them that made them different?
Well, the text highlights Caleb specifically. God says he had a different spirit and followed me wholeheartedly. Our source reflection points to a few things. It wasn't just basic courage. It was this ability to see past the immediate fear factors. They could perceive the underlying promise, the possibility, even when the obstacles looked overwhelming. That gave them the guts to stand up and say, "Let's go," when everyone else was shrinking back.
A different spirit, not just brave, but seeing something others couldn't or wouldn't.
Exactly. And sincerity, too. They didn't buckle under pressure or change their tune to fit in with the crowd. They stuck to their conviction, which was rooted in their faith. And boldness. The source suggests this boldness came from seeing God's role in it all. Their vision wasn't limited to just the giants and walls. They saw a bigger power at play.
So it wasn't just optimism, it was a kind of faith-fueled clarity about the bigger picture.
Precisely. And ultimately, that perspective, combined with wisdom and perseverance, meant they didn't just survive the 40 years. They were the ones who eventually did enter the land, and they received their inheritance there. Caleb, for instance, was later given Hebron.
Okay, so bringing this together, what's the core lesson here for us? It really feels like it boils down to focus, doesn't it? You're faced with a situation, it has promise, milk and honey, but also real challenges, the giants and fortified cities. Where do you put your attention? Do you zoom in on the problems and feel like a helpless grasshopper? Or do you focus on the potential and believe, yeah, we can overcome this?
That's exactly it. This whole 10 versus 2 scenario is such a powerful illustration of how much our perspective matters. It literally shaped the destiny of a generation in the story. And, it's not just an ancient tale. It poses a constant question to each of us, doesn't it? When you encounter your own giants, maybe challenges at work, difficulties at home, big obstacles in your life, what kind of report do you bring back? To yourself? To the people around you? Is it going to be one based on fear that leads you to shrink back? Or is it a report grounded in hope, in faith, that sees the possibilities even amidst the problems?
That really lands. It definitely gives you something profound to think about in your own circumstances. And just to leave you with one final piece from the material, it mentions that Caleb, the one commended for following wholeheartedly, eventually received Hebron as his inheritance. And later, Hebron became a really significant place. It's where King David was first anointed king, the start of his whole dynasty.
Right. Which adds another layer, doesn't it? It kind of hints that maybe the choices you make today, even if you feel like you're in the minority, choices made with that kind of faith and courage, maybe they have ripples you can't even imagine. Maybe you're laying groundwork for something important down the road, something much bigger than yourself.
So the perspectives you hold right now, the choices you're making, what future are they quietly building? For you, and maybe for others too. Something to consider.